All right. Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Tom Schwab. Tom, welcome. So awesome to have you, man.
Kevin, I am thrilled to be here. I love what you're doing, and it resonates so much with me and really what I do and how I live.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I want to start by giving a shout out to Nick. Nick, uh, in fact, I'm going to get his book here. Nick Pevlin, author of Confessions of a Terrible Husband, Lessons
Lessons
Learned
learned from a
from a
lumpy
Lumpy
couch.
Couch. and Nick and I got connected through our mutual friend, Paul. I have a friend of mine that is wanting to get a book published, and so Paul introduced me to Nick for that, and then Nick and I kind of became friends, and then he connected you and I, and it's very interesting how right before we hit the record button, I didn't realize that you and Nick, talked about one of his mentors in this book and stuff, Dan, and you had Dan was a mentor to you too, and I was commenting how wow, I was amazed to find out and just doing a quick little bit of research that Dan just recently passed away and stuff, and you and I got to talk about that, and what a testament to the power of relationships, which is what this podcast is all about in the first place and stuff. And it's just and just to hear you share before we hit the record button what an impact Dan had on you, and I did not even know Dan personally, but I will tell you, just looking at what I saw on social media and stuff, it was like, man, this guy impacted a lot of people's lives. Yeah, no.
You know, he
And
sent out an email to people and also mentioned it on his final podcast. His final podcast was December, I think it was 29th, and he passed away January 17th, or excuse me, January 21st. But he said he doesn't need a monument. He doesn't need a building named after him. He said his legacy is the people that are getting this email, the people that are listening to the podcast, that's his legacy, and you need to carry on his work from there. And it was such a fitting end to an amazing man, and his impact continues to live on. And one of the things that Dan always said was that your impact should double every decade, right? So what you learned from 20 to 30 should allow you to double your impact in the world. And I thought about that. It's like, I wonder if Dan's impact will continue doubling even after he's gone.
yeah. Well, you shared something with me interesting about the sale of his book before we hit the record button too. I think it is happening.
I I was I was speaking with the founder of Morgan James, who is the publisher of 48 Days to the Work You Love. And they originally published Dan's book 20 years ago. They came out with a 10-year anniversary edition that was updated, a 20-year anniversary. I've got a signed copy of that. It's behind glass. It's a very prized possession. And they were working on the 25th anniversary, which would have come out this year. And I was talking with him this morning here at the beginning of March, and he said that this year, in the first 2 months, that book has sold more than it has in any year in the previous 24 years. And it's just
Wow. Wow.
amazing. And I'm glad that people are learning about Dan Miller, but it's just like I wish they would have known about him 25 years ago,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
amazing man.
Yeah. So Nick, if you're listening to this, I just want to shout out to you. Thank you so much for connecting Tom and I. It's just already great things are happening from this, and I'm just really excited to have this conversation with you today, Tom, and stuff. And so, what I'd like to do is start off by turning it over to you. I want to give you the opportunity so we can set a little bit of context. Let the listeners know, who you are and what you're really all about, Tom. So why don't you share a little bit about, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you do and the impact you're making, and maybe even a little bit of the backstory of how you got into doing what you do.
Well, my fundamental belief is that the best gift you can ever give someone is to introduce them to a new idea or a new person, right? It's the one thing they can't do for themselves, and it can change their life, right? I'll forever be thankful for Dan Miller for introducing me to Nick Pavlidis. I'll be forever thankful for Brian Jacobs to introducing me to my bride, right? So many times now in business, people will say, "Oh, you're one funnel away." Well, the best things in life don't come through a funnel. They come from a conversation. And that's really what I've done in my life. My current company is called Interview Valet, and our mission is to personally introduce inspiring thought leaders to millions of people they could serve for the betterment of all. And we do that through something called podcast interview marketing, right? Getting thought leaders out there on targeted podcasts so that they can speak to their ideal clients, get that know, like, and trust. And, because I really believe today in business, the biggest problem that people have is obscurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't buy the best, we buy the best we know of. And right now, there are people praying for your product or service, right? They need it. The reason they're not buying it is because they don't know you exist.
That's
And I
right.
think a lot of people are talking about, oh, you need to break through the noise. I think the people telling us that are the ones selling us the megaphones. I'd much rather get in on the conversation that people are listening to and do that on podcast interviews. So we've been doing this since 2015. Um, I've got a team of 28 in Europe and North America, and we're helping high-level coaches and consultants. We're helping people in the B2B professional services get out there. We're also helping people in the investing area. And really, we're focusing on business, health, nutrition, and wellness, and just trying to make the world a better place, one introduction at a time.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I don't usually share this, but it seems especially fitting right now in this conversation because, how far are we into this? We're about a little over 2 years into me hosting the Million Dollar Relationships podcast. And I can tell you, Tom, this has been hands down the most rewarding thing I've done in my 28 years as an entrepreneur is hosting this podcast. I have met so many amazing entrepreneurs, and it has opened doors that would have never happened if I were not hosting this podcast.
But
And for entrepreneurs like you, being able to invite you on and just give you a place to just share from your heart and talk about this topic of relationships
my
is, man, what I mean, just I can't imagine anything more rewarding.
My my wife jokes that there are no such thing as vacations anymore. She's like, "Now you know somewhere everywhere," right? So wherever we go, it's a business trip, right? Because there's a podcaster, a client, someone that I know, and to me, that makes the world such a richer place. The
Absolutely.
richness of our life is the richness of our relationships. And I remember being on a plane one time, and as I was walking off the plane, a gentleman came up to me and he said, "Are you Tom Schwab?" And my first thought was, "Are you a process server?" And I was like, yes, I am." And he goes, "Oh, I recognized your voice." This guy had heard me on a podcast interview and had
Wow.
followed me I had no idea who he was, but he started to talk to me and it's like, "Oh, yeah, I follow Interview Valet and I've heard your podcast and I read your book and, wow, I've never been to Kalamazoo, but if I ever am, I'll look you up." And I'm thinking, I have no idea who this person is, but he recognized me from my voice. That's a powerful connection
It
that,
is.
you don't get from a Facebook ad or a Yellow Pages ad.
Yeah. Yes. Amen. Well, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, I'm gonna switch gears. I'm gonna reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, Tom, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business? So much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons. And Tom, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, in my office here, I wish I could flip the camera around. There are 18 pictures of different key people in my life. The skipper of, the first ship I served on, the superintendent of the Naval Academy when I was there. But the one that came to mind when you said that was a friend from high school,
Okay.
Brian Mitchell,
Oh,
right? We met freshman year in high school. I was a B student until I knew him, right? And then all of a sudden, the first midterm grades came out, and he was getting A's, and the other guys were getting A's, and I'm like, I don't want to be the most stupid one here, right? So I applied myself a little bit more, and I got better grades, right? And he would challenge me. He would force me to dream, and we were friends our entire life. If I wouldn't have met him, I don't believe that I would have gotten into the Naval Academy. I
okay.
don't believe that I would have seen that things were even possible. He always dreamed very big. And so we maintained our friendship um, throughout our adulthood. We both had our own lives. I was deployed, everything like that. But I always cherished every time that I spent with him. I'd always learn something. We'd grow together. And unfortunately, lost him way, way too early. We had talked about getting old, and one of the books that he gave me, I don't know if you've ever read this book. It's called Water for the Elephants. It was
No,
it
I
was made
haven't.
in it was made into a movie. The movie's not nearly as good, but he
Okay.
read this book about 2 years before he passed away, and he sent me a copy. And the premise of the book is these old guys in a nursing home telling stories, and one of them is telling how he used to carry water for the elephants. And Brian calls me up, sends me the book, and he's like, "Dude, we got to get busy. We've got no good stories for the nursing home, right? We got to get busy living here." And the thing is that he didn't realize he almost had a lifetime of stories already. And he passed away quickly, but he continues to be an inspiration. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of him, want to make him proud, and also know that he believed in me and would have encouraged me.
Wow. So if you think about over the years, and I'm sure you'll be able to come up with a number of examples for this. I'm just going to challenge you to come up with one. The first thing that comes top of mind for you. If you think about an opportunity where you got to make a really big impact, and you also know that that would have hands down never happened if not for the relationship that you had with Brian. What is an example of that, Tom?
Um, the people that I got to meet through him,
Okay.
right? Um, Brian was a very interesting guy, very entrepreneurial, right? He went through medical school and he got finished with medical school and realized he didn't like being a doctor. He didn't like being on call, the pager and everything like that. So he did a mission trip over to Bosnia Herzegovina and was helping unearth dead bodies and figure out the cause of death. And he's like, this is really interesting. So he became a forensic pathologist throughout the whole Chicagoland area, all the big cases he was doing. And
Wow.
he ran his own business on that, right? Fee for service. There's no insurance on this. But on the side, he also had a music studio. He was a music producer. When he passed away, he was producing Survivor. Remember Eye of the Tiger?
I do.
He was
I
pro-
totally
he was
remember that.
he was producing Survivor's most current album. And so the people that I got to meet through that was just amazing, right? What's ordinary to him was amazing to me. And I would have to say the most amazing people that he introduced me to was his family, right?
Okay.
They
Okay.
continue to inspire me, and it's now he's been gone over a decade, but to see, and just like last summer I spent time with his son and his wife out sailing on Lake Michigan, and it was that same kind of energy that
Yeah.
his dad had. Anything is possible, the dreaming, and that just inspired me.
Yeah.
So that is I will forever be grateful for that, and I hope that someday somebody tells a similar story about me. That would be
Yeah.
my wish.
For sure. For sure. Wow. That's really awesome. That's really awesome. Tom, I want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation because like I shared with you before we hit the record button, the goal of this podcast has always been really simple. I want to be able to get entrepreneurs like you and give you the opportunity to share your story and your experience around your most valuable relationships and honor those people. And then for the listeners who are also entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs, it's these stories that inspire them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And thanks to you, Tom. We definitely delivered on that. Any last thing you feel led to share before we
I
call?
I do, and it's a story about Brian.
Okay.
So Brian used to walk around in jeans and a scrub shirt, right? Um, Nobody ever called him doctor, except he'd make lawyers call him a doctor. He was just Brian, and everybody knew him that way. Um, his car broke down one time, right? And we had a contest because I was a sales rep putting incredible miles, and we were seeing who could get the most miles on their car. And I
Okay.
think I was at 470,000. He had just gotten over 500,000 and his car broke down. And by this time, both of us were driving around in a with our title to the car in the glove compartment. And the thought was, we'll give the car to the guy that, drives the tow truck if he'll give us a ride to the car dealership to buy a new one. So
Wow.
Brian gets um the ride to the car dealership, goes in there. He's busy. He's a businessman, right? He's got appointments to do. He's got jeans on and a scrub shirt, and he's trying to buy a car. Nobody will give him the time of day, right? He had enough money, I'm sure, in his checking account that he could have just written a check for it. But it didn't matter if he had $1 million or not. He had no relationship with anyone there.
Yeah.
And the thing is that he knew he'd done real estate deals before, that his word was golden. He could have gone in and bought $1 million property and said, Kevin, I'll buy it. I'll bring you the check tomorrow. That's as good as sold, right? And he told me afterwards that he would rather have a relationship than $1 million.
Mhm.
Because if you have $1 million check, if nobody knows you, they're not going to take it, right? But if you've got a relationship, your word is good enough. So I
Yeah.
think that just really struck me as we're talking about $1 million relationship. Focus on the relationships because that's what's important, not the $1 million check that nobody will take.
Absolutely. Wow. What a powerful story and powerful example that is right there. And, I have long believed that as entrepreneurs, our most valuable asset is relationships. Everything else stems from that, and we get the relationship piece right. And the business, that's a piece of cake doing business, especially with the right people. So,
Yes.
so for anybody listening to this going, man, Kev, I really like Tom. I love how Tom shows up. How can they find out more about what you guys are doing at Interview Valet? Any resources they can check out?
I'll put a page together. Just go to interviewvalet.com
Okay.
/MDR. Million
MDR.
dollar
Okay.
relationship.
Okay. Perfect.
Relationships. I'll put all my social media on there. There's an assessment, right? 10 questions. Will podcast interview marketing work for you? I wrote a book. Nick Pavlidis, our mutual friend, he was my writing coach in that. It sells on Amazon. If you want a copy, I'm happy to give you a copy of Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with a Targeted Interview Strategy. And then I'll put my calendar scheduling link on too. So if you'd like to talk with me, just go to interviewvalet.com /MDR.
Perfect. Perfect. I will make sure that we include that link in the show notes too. And Tom, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Kevin.